Knoxville. Game design. February 2020. Java game development. With Jared, Jacob, Jeffrey, Dylan, and Levi.
Welcome everyone to Knoxville Game Design for February 2020. This is a monthly discussion of game development topics. My name is Levi Smith. I'm in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Currently on the call we have Dylan Wolf in Lenore City.
Hi.
And also we have Jacob.
Hi.
So start out with a little bit of news. First of all, this is actually our 50th episode. You can actually go out and look on the podcast page. Let's see here, where is it at? No, I just brought it up. But yeah, go to podcast and you can find all of our previous podcasts. So yeah, I saw it's 49 episodes already. So that includes that first year that we did in 2016 at the Technology Cooperative, where we kind of played an indie game every month. And then after that, and in the second year, we started going deeper into actual game development topics. But yeah, 50 episodes. I may have to go on the server and change this a little bit, so some of the old episodes may start dropping off. So I think there's like some configuration that may have to change. Oh, it looks like we have Jared with us. Hey, Jared.
Hey. Am I audible?
Yep, I hear you. Yeah, we're just going over a little bit of news to start out right now. So I'm going to share screen, share. Yeah, so these are all the episodes. Yeah, so this is 4 years of Knoxville Game Design since we've been doing the podcast. The first episode that we did was in January 11th of 2016. So we've been going pretty strong with almost one episode every month since then. I wanted to show off a blog that I was reading from one of the people in our Discord chat, Mike Garcia. He has a good article here. You can find him at mgarcia.org on the social media feedback loop. And I kind of feel with what he's saying here with starting a lot of projects and never finishing anything. But yeah, he's got a lot of ideas about game development and things like that. One thing that I thought was interesting is the imposter syndrome. I hear a lot of people talk about the imposter syndrome, but I feel like anyone who actually like works hard and buster and gets stuff done really doesn't feel this. So I don't know. Maybe the imposters, people that feel imposter syndrome, are imposters. He has some good thoughts on that. So definitely check his blog out right there. One thing that I found when I was searching some game development forums, I was actually on Seth Robinson's forum. He's the creator of Lord and other games, Legend of the Red Dragon BBS game. And I saw somebody was talking about a Discord like app store or where you can sell your games through Discord. And I'd never heard anything about this, so I don't know if this is new. There's something called Nitro built into Discord, so I don't know if you have to like sign up for Nitro or what. But yeah, you can just click on Sell Your Game, and you say, let's go. And it has this thing where you can set up teams and add applications. I really haven't jumped into this yet. But something I definitely want to check out. So it might be a good alternative to like Itch.io, Game Jolt, or even Steam. So I'm going to look into this a little bit more and maybe know more about it next month. Yeah, on our Discord channel, it's been going pretty strong. I did go in here and add some new emoji, so you can use the Sunsphere emoji or the Unity emoji, GameMaker, or Unreal emoji. So you just click on the little face right there and they should pop up right there. So if anybody has any recommendations for any other emojis for our channel, just let us know. I did create a role for the Knoxville Game Design Originals. If anybody has recommendations for any other roles, I might come up with one like for contributors or people who regularly attend the meetings. I wanted to welcome the new people to our Discord channel. First of all, we have Trumpet 7347, and he says, "Hey, I'm a software dev that moved up to Knoxville not too long ago, and I've always been interested in game development. So he thought he would jump in on our Discord channel. So yeah, we welcome Crumpet, and we also have Tambalaya, and also Gerald Burke. And I don't know, I have never met Gerald before, but I have seen. I think he is the guy that runs the Tri-City game developers. I guess that's in Kingsport and Johnson City and that Morristown area. So it looks like they're going to start moving all their stuff to Discord as well. Seems like Facebook groups are kind of dying out. So we welcome Jared in our channel, or Gerald, sorry. So hey, Dylan, did you have anything you wanted to show off this month?
No.
Oh, okay. Hey, Jacob, did you have any game development projects you've been working on lately?
I have, but I haven't really done anything with them recently.
Oh, okay. Still working with Game Maker?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have Ludum Dare 45 coming, or 46 coming up in April, so we'll have to get together then.
Okay.
Hey, Jared, have you been working on anything lately?
Well, I had my little practice project for learning JMonkey engine.
Oh, okay. So you're
which
Black Jar in our Discord channel, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, it's good to meet you. I know we've been communicating back and forth quite a bit lately.
Which that was kind of just intended as a practice project, so I don't know if I'll do a lot more with it right now. I may revisit it later.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of stepped out of that in order to try and work on sort of a GUI library, because I realized I needed GUIs, and if I wanted to do some more things, and I don't want to redo that every single game.
Mm-hmm. So is this GUI library is written in Java, right?
Yeah, it's written specifically for use with JMonkey engine.
Oh, okay. I know you have your JMonkey engine on your GitHub, right?
The library?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started on the library. It's a long way from being really usable. Well, I mean, you could use it to just make a really simple button, but I just kind of started that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the engine is on their own GitHub, because it's not like I created the engine or anything.
Oh, okay.
That's I have my very small, simple arcade engine, but this is like a big, fancy 3D engine in Java that people who know a lot more about game engines have been developing for 10 years, so I decided I'd rather do that than try to create a 3D engine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never done 3D in Java before. Seems like that'd be pretty complex.
Well, I know that basically there's this lightweight Java game library, and just about everything that's 3D in Java uses that at some level, and it's basically it. Have you seen, like, what am I thinking of? Like, I'm thinking of something in C, and I can't think of the name of it. But there are several. It's basically, most of it is a wrapper for, like, OpenGL.
That's what I was thinking, OpenGL, yeah.
And it has OpenAL and things. But basically it lets you write a 3D engine in Java in the same way you would if you were writing in C or C++. And it just has a very lightweight wrapper around that. Then JMonkey engine is an actual engine that uses it, which...
Oh, okay.
So,
see,
yeah,
I know I looked at your Knight Ferret engine before. You have that on your GitHub as well.
Yeah, that's a fairly simple thing that is uses Swing and Java 2D, where I basically made a Cat Pac-Man clone, and then I was going to make a space shooter, and I realized that probably 90% of the code was going to be cut and paste, so I stopped and sort of extracted it out into an engine.
Yeah, that's always... I know I've done that with a few of my old XNA games. Like, oh, I'm doing the same stuff over and over again. I need to extract this out and just put it in a library, because I developed that resistor game and a lot of the draw commands and all that. I mean, all of it's a lot of the same. So I just had that library that I could pull into my new projects and not have to rewrite all that code again. Yeah, but it looks like you have a lot of projects on GitHub. I just still haven't gotten through here. I know I looked at your Pac-Man clone as Macy May.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a nice little Pac-Man game. And so you have the source for all your games out there? open source?
Yeah, I have so far I've only actually completed 2 games. I have my early attempt at a 3D rendering engine that I decided that was an example of the common beginner mistake of trying to make your first game your masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
And since then I've decided I'd rather focus on making games than just trying to be an engine geek just so I could brag about being an engine geek, basically. I'd rather just actually make the game.
Yeah, I've been doing this for years, and I still haven't made my masterpiece. Yeah, but I think we all have that ambition to make something great when we first start out. But yeah, that's what I do. I just make a lot of little small games, and yeah, none of them have been hits or anything. But I've learned a lot along the way.
But yeah, if you look at all, it's like they're 2 actual arcade games, and there's just a lot of other stuff. There are a couple of Minecraft mods and various other things. Some of them are like small practical applications and things like that. But yeah, so far I've only actually successfully made 2 games, or unless you count my little practice game, but that's not really that much of a game at this point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I know in our group we've had a lot of people that were into Minecraft, so it seems like Minecraft modding has been very popular. I know Mike Neal, he used to be in the group. I think he got Minecraft running on a Raspberry Pi, I think, and he's done a lot of stuff with it.
I would say that's where I learned how to write code earlier, but I'd say most of learned how to actually program I learned from modding Minecraft, because that's where I had my first non-trivial projects. I wouldn't call them big in like a professional sense, but my first that were non-trivial and that I actually maintained for different versions and things like that and had to organize them. So I'd say that was a really good experience for me, that's really where I learned to really program as opposed to simply knowing how to type some code.
So I know the original version of Minecraft, which I was going to talk about today, was written in Java. So when you mod Minecraft, is that also in Java, or is that do they have some specific language for doing that?
Yeah, it's in Java. I think the non-Java version, they're starting to make like a scripting language for that, but Minecraft modding is all in Java. It's basically decompiling, and people have figured out how to deobfuscate it and everything, and they kind of put in their license you're allowed to do that. So there's no official modding API. The main modding, there isn't modding API, but it's a mod in of itself that's third parties. But yeah, it's all in Java and basically going in and extending the engine or the core game.
Very
cool. The
way
that works.
Yeah, that's cool that when I guess it was Marcus Preston when he was writing Minecraft that they made it. So, I don't know if he made it so in mind so that people could mod it, or if people just went in there and kind of hacked it and figured out how to make their own thing out of it.
I think it's the second. People figure out how to hack it, but because Notch, the creator, had been big into modding things like Doom, he's like embraced that and just put in the license. Yeah, you can mod it as long as you don't try to sell your mods or distribute the source code to the main game.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of speed running on Twitch, and I know that like they've modded almost like every single NES game out there, like Zelda. I was just watching Super Mario 3, so they can like change the levels and make unique randomized levels, and it's pretty amazing what people can do once you figure out the innards of programs like that. Oh, looks like Jeffrey just joined us. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going? I think Jeffrey just went mute.
I'm good.
Oh.
Just joining in. Hey.
Cool. Been doing anything interesting? Been doing any 3D printing or anything?
I've been coding trading robots.
Oh, cool. Trading robots or training robots?
Trading, like they make currency trades.
Whoa, that sounds cool.
Just doing that in my spare time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, so are these like bots or actually physical robots?
Well, they're software programs that run and make trades in trading software. It's a collection of them I have are up about between 20 and 30% since July. So
oh, wow.
Not too bad.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I've always been really interested in currency. I have a collection of like Japanese yen, and it's pretty amazing, like the way it fluctuates day to day, the values for trading in currency.
Yeah, it's an interesting game.
So it's just a game. You're not dealing in real currency. Very cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with the topic for this month. Let's bring up the notes over here. So we're so it sounds like hopefully nobody's bored by this month, but this is going to be a basic introduction to Java. I got the slides here, but I want to do it in respect to game development from a game developer's perspective. Java can be used to do many different things. I know it's running on a billion different devices ubiquitously and things like that. So a little bit of background on Java. It was designed by James Gosling at Sun Microsystems. 1995 was the first version. I started using Java in 1998 when I started at Georgia Tech. That was like the first language that they taught us there, or that we had to learn there. And it sounds like, from what I read in our Discord channel, a lot of other people started with Java as well. One benefit to Java is it is object-oriented. It wasn't the first object-oriented language. There were other languages, I think, like Simula and Modula. And as we talked about a few months ago, Smalltalk 80 was obviously before Java. But Oracle bought out Sun Microsystems. I don't know, I guess that was about 10 years ago or so. Time flies. So Oracle now owns Java JDK, and all that. But there is an open JDK, Open Java Development Kit implementation. I think that's community driven, and Oracle just takes what is created by OpenJDK, and I guess they put their stamp of approval on it, then call it the official Java JDK and JRE. One thing I wanted to go ahead and point out up front is Java is not JavaScript. So if anyone out there listening came here for a JavaScript presentation, this is not JavaScript. So I think a lot of people get confused about this. So JavaScript is a loosely typed language. It's kind of like a scripting language. It's primarily used in web browsers for doing client-side scripting. But I have worked with it on the command line before, so it is possible to do JavaScript command line. It's based on the ECMAScript specification and is originally developed by Netscape years ago. So we're not talking about JavaScript today. We're talking about just plain Java. So Java is strongly typed. It's very similar to other languages such as C# and C, but it is object-oriented, but it's very similar to C#. Java did come before C#, so I kind of feel like Microsoft basically took what Java did. I think there was originally like a J++ years ago, so maybe C# came out of J++. But Java, it actually compiles in the platform-independent bytecode, where JavaScript is just scripting, it's interpreted. So you actually do have to run a compiler for your Java programs. And you actually run these programs using what they call the Java runtime environment. And that Java runtime environment is specific per platform. So based on what platform you're running, such as Windows, Macintosh, or Linux, you get a specific JRE for that. Then it can run that platform-independent bytecode. So it's kind of nice. You compile once, and you then give that bytecode to run on any system that you want. Formerly, there were also things called applets, where you could actually embed a Java program into a web page, but I think that's been discontinued or deprecated, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I actually had a few games that I wrote as Java applets, and they don't seem to be able to run any longer. I think it might have been discontinued, like in Java 7. Okay, so here's some of the pros of Java. As I just talked about, the bytecode runs on multiple platforms. I have some Java programs that I wrote like 20 years ago, and I could take that bytecode, the class files, and still run them on the latest Java runtime environment, which I think is really cool. Most things that I wrote 5 years ago in Unity don't even work anymore without going through a lot of pain and effort. One thing that I really like about Java is the graphics API is built directly into the language. You don't have to go out and get any additional libraries or build anything in. It's just you download the JDK and it's all there for you to use. And I'll talk a little bit about the AWT, which is the Abstract Window Toolkit, I believe, and Swing in a little bit. The cons to Java, you have to distribute the Java runtime environment. I don't know if there's any licensing agreements that you have to worry about with distributing that. I think if you just download it and include it with your game bundle, I think you're okay. But I'll talk about things like jar files a little bit later, which makes that a little bit easier. Loading assets can be a little bit difficult, such as sound and graphics. There really isn't a simple way to do that. There's something called a toolkit that you can use, but it seems like it changes over time. And I remember when I was doing applets, loading graphics through an applet was different than loading graphics by the command line or in a standalone application. So loading graphics and sound can be a little bit difficult. And people have always said that Java is slow. I guess it's actually slower than platform-specific executables, like if you write a game in C++, C, or C# and you compile that down into an operating system engine, such as a Windows EXE. Well, obviously, Java is going to be slower than that because it still has to run through the Java runtime environment. So if you want to get started in Java, you can go out to the Oracle website. You can probably just go to your favorite search engine, type in Java JDK. See if I can shift-click that. It's on this Oracle Tech Network. Let's see if I can copy this right here. Let's see if I can paste that in here. So yeah, you'll come up with a page like this. If you go out and get the latest Java version, which is currently 13.0.2, the JDK 13, it's a little bit confusing. They call it Java SE. I think that's just standard edition. They came out with a few different editions, like the Enterprise editions, which includes a bunch of stuff for databases and doing connections and things like that. But yeah, if you just get the Java SE JDK, you should be good to go. There's also 11.06 is the long-term service, LTS, so it's more of a stable version than the latest version. But yeah, you just click JDK and download it, and it will come up with a lot of different versions to download. So you can either get like Linux, Mac, or Windows, 64-bit or 32. You can either get it as a zip and exe for Windows or a DMG for Mac OS, or a deb or an RPM, whether you're running like Ubuntu or Red Hat on Linux. And so you just install that. So I found out if you get the latest version, you don't have to sign up for anything. But if you do want to go in their archive and get an older version of Java, which typically you don't have to do, but I was looking for a tool called Applet Viewer, then to download like an old version of Java, the old version of Java JDK, you do have to sign up for an Oracle account, and they ask you for a bunch of information like phone numbers and company information and all that. So yeah, just watch out for that. Okay, so Hello World. So here's a simple Hello World program that I wrote. So basically you have a class, and the entry point for all Java programs is your public static void main, and you want to pass in string or your string args array. You don't have to use those if you don't want to, but if this will give you the command line parameters in an array. So all we want to do is create a new Hello World class. So class is kind of like a structure, but it can hold variables and methods. So then your constructor is just the same name as the class, but you don't have a return type. So it's just public hello world. And to print out something to the command line, we use system out print line. So that's all we need to do. So let's go over here, and to run a Java program. Well, first to compile it, you do Java C, which is your Java compiler, and do hello world. And then all of your Java programs are going to end with the .java extension. And when you run this, then it's going to create a, let's see, hello world star. It's going to create a hello world class. So to run this class file, we just do Java hello world. Then it's going to say hello world. And if you use system out print line ln, then it will put a return at the end of that. I think you can do system out print if you don't want the extra carriage return at the end. So yeah, that's all. That's it. Sometimes I know, especially in previous versions of Java, you had to set up your path in your environment variables to point to the location of your Java installation. Typically, I put mine in like D program files. So if you go out and you run like Java C version and it returns an error instead of a version number, then that means that your command prompt, which you just run by typing CMD in your search window, that means that it's not aware of that location in your path. So then you have to do something like set path equals %path %, then semicolon, then put in the location of your JDK. So you can see right here in my path, I got deprogram files Java JDK 13.1 set.bin. You can refer to it explicitly using the old path, but it's a lot easier if you just have it built in your path and you just like run Java like that. So watch out for that. Talked about all that. The class follows your bytecode. Okay. So, talked about public static void main is your entry point. Talked about that. Constructor must match class name. So you create new objects, obviously, as I was talking about before, using the new keyword. So there's no pointers, anything like that. You just say new, then your class name, and that will give you an instance of that object that you can assign back to a variable. There's no need to delete or free any of your classes or instances of your classes, your objects. Java does have a garbage collection, so periodically it will come around and find things that no longer have references. They're just kind of like dangling out there, and it will clean those up and free those for you. I think Jared said in our Discord chat that it uses, what was it, a sweep? I don't know the specifics.
I think it's called something like trace and sweep. I don't remember the exact name. But yeah, basically what it means is it's not keeping track of what you deleted, and it's not keeping track of everything you have. It just keeps track of things like your main class and threads and a few other things that it can definitely find anything still referenced from. And then when it does the garbage collector, it goes and finds everything that's still reachable, and if it can't find it, it basically deletes it.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah, I've never known the details behind it.
I did until recently, and I did a lot of really kind of, in retrospect, dumb-seeming things. Things that would have made sense in C or C++, but make no sense in Java, like trying to create arrays with like a handle and things, because I thought if you had circular references that it might leak the memory if you deleted both of them. They'd keep each other alive, and that's not at all true, because that was based on misunderstanding the garbage collector.
Oh,
But
okay.
the way it does it, where it finds everything valid, if you have two things, like if you had, say, a game where, like a Sims type game, and you had two characters who were married and a spouse in their field, and you deleted them both, the garbage collector would realize that no, you couldn't find them, so it just delete them. They wouldn't keep each other alive in memory somewhere, like I thought.
Oh, okay.
But I found that out pretty recently by talking to the JMonkey engine Discord, and the people there knew more about garbage collection than I did.
Yeah, I don't know. I know the basics of it, but yeah, it looks like there's a Wikipedia page on tracing garbage collection. It looks like they have some diagrams here of how that algorithm works. But yeah, and I've been working on my little C game, my SDL shooter, and I've run into an issue with it because like I have a linked list structure, and I put and it has pointers to void pointer, or has a space for a void pointer, so I'm cram anything in there that I want to, but the structures that I'm putting in there have pointers to other objects. So when I clean that up, when I free, I had to actually go into each one of those structures and free what those structures are pointing to, and it just becomes a huge headache. So I'm very grateful for languages like C# and Java that have their own garbage collection built in. I guess one downside is like you never do know when those things are going to be cleaned up. So you may hit a lag spike if the garbage collector runs at an inopportune time. But
yeah, I just thought that was an interesting, kind of useful thing to point out, because I don't think any like beginning books or typically classes or tutorials or anything ever beat that. And in fact, I think I've seen some books where the authors apparently didn't know that. I took their bad advice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those things like people are just like, don't worry about it. The garbage collector runs in the background and it'll handle everything for you. But if you have a program where you're creating millions of objects, and it'll quickly become very important if you start to run out of memory. Okay, so let's go back here. So you have various options for scoping your classes and variables, and this is standard for a lot of languages like C# and C, or not C, but C# and Java, and I think Ruby uses this too. But you have public, which means if I create an instance of a class, or two different classes, class A can refer to that variable or method in class B if it's declared public. If it's declared private, then class A won't be able to reference that variable or method if it's declared private. And protected is like a special case. So if you have class A, then class B is a subclass of class A, and it has protected methods, then that means that class A can reference those methods in the subclass, but no other class can. So if you have class C that's not a subclass, then class C can't refer to those variables or methods because it's not a subclass. So that's what protected is. We probably won't see it too often, but I've had a few cases where it's been helpful. I mean, obviously you could just declare everything public, but that's not the way that they intended for it to be used. Okay, and also there's an API, Abstract Programmers Interface, and Java docs, which are very helpful. So if you're learning Java, you just go to the Java docs, and this is kind of looked the same ever since Java. See, I started in 1998 when we were using JDK 1.17b. So this hasn't changed much. I think they've changed like the style sheets and everything, but it's always been this like 3-frame thing. It's pretty nice. If there's any class that I'm looking for, like I want to look for like J label or something, you can just search and then just click right there, and you can find all of the methods, the constructors. And if I didn't mention earlier, constructor is just like the entry point for a class. It's kind of like initialize. Whenever you create a new class or a new instance of a class, using the new keyword, it's going to automatically call the constructor. So I think it's required, maybe not, but if you pass in the wrong number of arguments to the constructor, then it will throw an error. But you can overload the constructor, which overloading just means you're passing different parameters. So you can have different implementations of this constructor method based on which parameters you pass in. It gives you all of the methods that you can call and the return type. So if you want to know what set horizontal alignment is, you can just click on that. And it gives kind of a quick description of what these are and other things to look out for. So that's the Java docs. So here's a simple game, a number guessing game that I usually start out with, high or low. Here's the code over here. So basically we're going to have 3 variables: a secret number, the number you're trying to guess, the number that you've just guessed and the number of guesses. So we're going to set the secret number to a random value 1 to 100. So the way to get a random value is using math.random. And I believe that gives you a floating point value, 0 to 1. So we're going to multiply that by 99 to get a value 0 to 99. Then we're going to add 1 to that, which gives us a value 1 to 100. Then we want to cast that as an integer because we don't want people to have to guess decimal points and things like that. So by putting int in parentheses, that means we're going to cast it. So it's just going to drop off those decimal points. I think there's an alternative method. I think you can do like a math.floor instead of casting as an int, and it basically gives you the same thing. We're going to set our number of guesses, or our guess number to -1 just as an initializer, and the number of guesses to 0. Then we're going to have a big while loop. So while the guess number is not the secret number, then we're going to keep looping. So then it's going to print out a message, guess the number 1 to 100. And the nice thing, I can't remember what version of Java they started this in, but now they have a scanner class, which you can pass in the system in object. And that will allow you to read input from the command line. I remember back in Java 1.1, there was like this really hokey way of like trying to get command line input, and it took like 10 lines of code or something like that. So I really like this scanner class, but you do have to import it using Java util scanner. Util is a class you'll probably see a lot. I remember I used it a lot back in Java 1.1. There's Java util vector, which is a kind of like a dynamically sized array. But I think now they have an array list that you can use instead, but I won't get into that today. So basically, you read the number the player has guessed by using s.nextInt. So that'll read the command line in and get the int value out of it and assign that to the guess number. We're going to increase the number of guesses by 1 using ++. That's just a shortcut notation for add and assign 1. So if the guess number is greater than the secret number, we're going to print out lower. If it's less than the secret number, we're going to press higher, guess a higher number. Then if it equals, we're going to say correct and print out what the number was, and then print out the total number of guesses. Then at that point, since the guess number equals the secret number, then this will be true. So then we're going to jump out of the while loop. I mean, I guess you could put a break in there and just jump out right here, but I think this is a little bit more elegant right here. Oops. And so to start this thing up, we're going to call public static void main, just create a new number guess right there. So show you this in action. So I can just do a type on numguess.java. So you can see the code here. It's not as pretty on the command line as it is in the Notepad++ editor. But yeah, just run Java numguess. So I'm going to guess the number 50. Higher, 75, lower, so let's do 62, lower, let's do 58, so 58 was the correct number, 4 total guesses. So anybody out there wanting to learn, I say with any programming language, just make a simple game like this, command line game, just to learn the basics, just to get started. So after you get a simple thing like that working, we want to start doing graphics. So here's how you create a basic window. So Java has 2 different windowing toolkits. The original was the AWT, and you include that by importing Java AWT star and also Java AWT.event.star. That will give you the event handlers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this will allow you to do things like create a window, create buttons, create checkboxes, and things like that. So here's some simple code to get a window up and running. So the new version, the alternate version, is called Swing. So it was Sun's attempt of making platform independent GUI objects. So in the AWT, if you created a button, then that button will look different on Windows than it would look on Mac or Linux. But with Swing, it tried to make it so that all these components look the same on all platforms. So I'm going to use the Swing's approach of doing this. And all the swing components are preceded by a capital J. So in AWT, you may have like a frame and a label. In swing, you have a J frame and a J label. So you basically create a new frame. I call it F right here. J frame F gets a new J frame. You pass in the title of that frame. Frame is basically a window. Then I want to create a label object, which is basically just like a text label, or you can actually put graphics and things in there as well. So I'm going to create a new J label, which says hello world. It's very important to set the preferred size of these, otherwise you're going to get like a really small window or maybe nothing at all. So I'm going to set the preferred size of the label to 800 by 600. There are other methods, like you can set a max size and a min size and things like that, which come into play whenever you're resizing the window. We're going to set the horizontal alignment, and in swing they have this nice swing constants dot center that you can pass in. I think before you actually had to pass in like an integer. You never really knew what the integer represented, so it's nice to have that. And to make, if you don't set the font for the label, then it'll turn out really, really small. So we're going to set the font by creating a new font object and passing the parameter sans serif font.plain, and we're going to make it 96 point size. So that's going to make it look really big. So to add this label back to the frame, we're going to use f.getContentPane, which is like the container for the frame. Then we're just going to call add, then pass in that label. Then it's also important after you add that you call f.pack. So that's going to take your frame object, then lay out all those graphical components whenever it gets started. Otherwise, you're not going to see anything when it starts. So in the old version of Java, when I was doing it, to handle things like closing and all that, you actually had to implement window listener. And there's like 7 different methods, like on Windows close, on Windows open, on window initialize, and blah, 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 blah. So in Swing, they had this nice thing called set default close operation. Then you can pass it JFrame displays on close. So that makes it so whenever you click that X on that window, then it's going to close and free up the memory. And then the final thing is you want to set the window to be visible. So you use f.setVisible and pass in true. So let's run this. Java, what was it? Simple window. And you don't, so whenever you compile your Java program, it's going to create an associated class file with the same name, but whenever you run it, you just type in Java and then the name of the class without the .class. So whenever you do tab completion, it wants to throw that .class in at the end, but you don't want to do it. So here's the simple window. It just says hello world, and you can resize it. Oh, that's interesting. They actually have like the triple dots now. By default, it doesn't put it centered on the screen, so there's some code that I'll show a little bit later, or it's in one of the programs that will allow you to do that. So we want to draw something to our window. So what we want to do is make a new JComponent object. So all of these objects I was talking about, like JLabel and then like the checkboxes and all that, they extend, or they're subclasses of JComponent. So you can just create a plain JComponent and draw directly on there. Now the old way of doing this, you use the canvas object, but I think that's kind of like the old way of doing it. So I think everybody just draws directly to the JComponent now. What you want to do is you want to override the paint component. So by default, JComponent has an implementation of paint component, but you can go in there and write your own since you're subclassing this, and that's what you're going to use to draw. This paint component is going to have a parameter called graphics G. So you're going to use G dot, then the different draw methods for graphics to draw different things. Be aware that whenever you're drawing things like lines and circles and rectangles and things like that, the coordinates are relative to that J component. There should be a capital C right there. So yes, similar to like Game Maker and all the other older software programs, where Y goes from 0 to the maximum size from top to bottom, then X goes from left to right. There are more complex drawing methods. You can cast your graphics object, your G, to graphics 2D, and that will give you some expanded graphics capabilities such as rotating, scaling, and shearing, and things like that. So here's the basic methods. So for rectangles, you got draw rect and fill rect. Oval or ovals and circles, which if you didn't know, a circle is just a specific case of an oval, kind of like a square is a specific case of a rectangle. So you can draw a circle using draw oval. Just make sure the height and width are equal. Similar to a square is a rectangle where the height and width are equal. Lines, you just use g.draw line. You specify the first x and y coordinate to the second x and y coordinate. Use and draw text with g.draw string. You just pass in the string that you want to draw and give it the x and y position. And also Java has arc, so you can draw an arc, either a filled or an outline of an arc. And you can set different colors for these using g.setColor. So here's an example of some of these. So the first one is a filled arc in magenta, which is all red and all blue. The second picture here is of a circle, so you can see 100, 100 for width and height. So you use fill oval to draw that. And this one is a filled rect, a square, and then there's a draw rect, just does the outline. I'm drawing that in orange. And also, you can do a rounded rect. So that's something I haven't seen in a lot of languages. So you basically pass the width and height of the rectangle. Then you also pass in these other two parameters, which are like the roundedness of the corners, which is kind of cool. And also, here's two calls to draw a line. So it's just like a little X that I did right here. So it just crosses like that. Then at the bottom here, I just have the different draw string methods for writing what each of those functions were. So let me run that. So Java, what did I call this? Java, I called it drawing primitives. So yeah, here it is. Really doesn't do much, but just a basic example of how to get these different things on the screen. There is like a draw image as well, but I'm not going to get into that today. I was thinking about, I just didn't have time to get into draw images and loading images and things like that. So there's two types of inputs that you can do in Java. You can either do like event-driven or polling. So typically I do event-driven programs in Java. They aren't very processor-intensive or anything. So event-driven is like discrete events, like a mouse click. The mouse is pressed down, or the mouse is released, or a button press, the key is pressed, or the key is released, and things like that. The other type of input is like polling, where you want like a joystick position every frame, or you want the mouse pointer position every frame, or you want the current state of a button. So basically polling is where you check every single update. So I won't be talking about that today. So with the event-driven input, you want to define callback methods. Now these are all a part of this mouse listener class, which is a part of that Java auth event star that I mentioned earlier. So to handle mouse events, you have to implement these methods: mouse pressed, mouse released, mouse clicked, mouse entered, and mouse exited. And I do have that code. Yeah, here's the number guess, simple window. Where is it at? Tic-tac-toe. Okay. Yeah, so what you want to do is you want to extend JComponent, then implement mouse listener. Then down here, I have the code for, mouse pressed right here. And all these other ones are just empty. Mouse released, mouse clicked, mouse entered, and mouse exited. But I believe these are abstract methods in the mouse listener class, so they're required to be implemented, even if they don't have anything. Now, there is something called a mouse adapter. There's adapter classes for each of these listeners, so that will implement all of those methods for you. But I believe if you use the mouse adapter, then you can't. There's something about you can't do inheritance again. Oh, by the way, Java only has single inheritance. So if you extend JComponent, you can no longer extend any other class. In other languages, well, the only one that I know is C++. It has multiple inheritance, so you can inherit from multiple classes. But Java, you can only do inherit from one class at a time.
I think there are some dynamic languages, like I know Python will do multiple inheritance.
Oh, okay.
So it's more common than just like C++.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I know C++ has like really weird things like friend methods and all that, and I've only done a little bit of C++, but yeah, I didn't know Python had multiple inheritance. I wonder if Ruby has it as well. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I don't know. It might.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Okay, so one important thing I always forget to do is add a mouse listener to your component, this is like one of those Java things, which you probably don't have to do in a lot of other languages. But you got to add mouse listener, and then you want to pass in the class that implements all those methods that I mentioned earlier. So since this is the class that implements those, I'm going to pass in this. Otherwise, your mouse clicks won't work at all. So if you go in, you implement mouse listener, and implement all this, and it doesn't work, it's probably because you forgot to add a mouse listener. And by the way, implements is a way of doing an interface. So mouse listener, I believe, is actually an interface, so you're not actually like subclassing mouse listener, you're just implementing it as an interface. It's interface. Which, that's a discussion for another time. So whenever you click the mouse, then I got some debug output, and it'll tell you exactly where you clicked on that J component. Let's see if I still have that in here. I think I commented out. So when you press the mouse, and you're going to get a mouse event, and we're just going to call it E. You can call it whatever you want to. I'm just going to call it E. And yeah, here it is right here. So if the game's playing, then we're going to system out print line, and then you can get the X position and the Y position by using E.getX and E.getY. And that will tell you exactly where on the that component that you've clicked. So after you hit mouse point, after you do something, you want to call repaint, because this is event driven. We're not updating the J component every frame, which is kind of different if you're accustomed to Unity and GameMaker. So you actually got to manually call repaint. And I think you can call repaint multiple times, and it will actually repaint that when it has the chance to. So I don't think calling repaint multiple times is a bad thing. It's just sometimes it just bundles all those repaints up into one and just calls it once when it's ready to do so. So yeah, I talked about that. So my example that I wrote this little tic-tac-toe game. So we're going to convert the coordinates in our tic-tac-toe game into cell rows and columns. So I'll show how to do that. Uh-oh. So first of all, when we create, so this is my tic-tac-toe board class. So we're going to have an integer array of 3 by 3. So I have these defined as constants. Board rows, board calls. When I first started developing this, I just hard-coded the 3 in there, but that's not the proper thing to do. So whenever I create a new board object, 2D integer array, then I just pass in the rows and calls. So this will make it so that if I want to have a 4 by 4 tic-tac-toe game or a 10 by 8 tic-tac-toe game, then we can change these up here, and it should work with any size 2D array. We're going to create an array of players, so we're just going to have 2 players. We're going to represent those by a string. Player 0 is X and player 1 is O. Then we're just going to alternate between those players. Then we're going to call restart when we start up. That's just a method that I defined, which initialize. Restart's really a bad name for that. I should have called it initialize game. So basically here in restart, we're going to loop through all the board array, every cell in the board. We're going to set it to 0. So whenever somebody makes a move, we're going to set that cell to either a 1, I believe a 1 or a 2. Okay. And the 1 will represent X and the 2 will represent player O. So we're going to set keep playing to true, current player to 1, then repaint just so it has initial paint when it starts up. So yeah, once it starts up, then it's just going to wait for input. So when we click, so let me go ahead and start this. So Java tic-tac-toe. So this is how it goes. So whenever you click, first player goes first. I really should have something on here that says, oh, player X go, player Y go, or player O go. So then you just alternate. So put an O there, then put a O there, and an X here. Then once you get a row or a column filled up by the same player, then it's going to say that player wins. It doesn't do anything cool like drawing a line through it or anything like that, but you can press restart and play another game. So it does check diagonals, rows, and columns like that. So yeah, what's this doing behind the hood? So yeah, while the game is playing, we're going to get the X and Y coordinate. And you can see over here in my output, I still have the mouse pressed locations over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this function that I wrote called mark cell. And that's going to take a row and a column and then the current player. And the current player is just going to alternate between X and O by this set next player. Set next player is kind of a Easter egg hunt here. Yeah, set next player is just going to increment the current player. If the player number is greater than 2, then we're going to set the player back to 1. So it's just going to flop between X and O. Now we could add a third player in here. Actually, we'll just have to change that to a 3 and then add a new player called Y or Z or something like that. So yeah, I never thought about a 3-player tic-tac-toe game, but it seems like that would be possible. So yeah, so this mark cell, we're going to pass it a row and column, but to get the row and column, then I'm going to have to call these methods called get cell row and get cell called. So I don't know if this is the best way to do it. I could have created like a point class or something that returns 2 values. The reason I have this broke up into 1 or 2 different functions is so that I can get an integer back. So you pass into Y coordinates. So basically all this is going to do is divide Y by the cell size, and that will give you the row. Then same for get cell column. We're going to divide X by the cell size, and that will give you the column number. Yeah, so then we're going to pass that row number and column number into mark cell. So that just takes the row and column and the cell value. So then it's going to say, is it a valid move? So we're going to actually check if somebody's already put an O in that column, or if you've already put an X or something there, we don't want to let you be able to click that again and put a new value in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to check and see if it equals 0 in that cell. If it is, then we're going to set it to that value of that player. Then we're going to say that was a valid move. So we're going to return is valid move. So that way we know that the player did a valid move. So if they did a valid move, we're going to repaint. Then we're going to check and see if there's a winner. Then we're going to also check and see if it's game over. So those, I think that's on my next slide here. Oh, actually here. Check win state and check game over state. So after every move, we've got to check to see if there's a winner. And also we have to check if it's game over. So to check if there's a winner, basically it's this big ugly loop here. So we're going to check and see if all of the values across a row are the same. And then we're going to check and see if all the values across the column are the same. And then there's a special case with the diagonals, which I'm doing right here. So that's basically going to check from the upper left-hand corner to check and see if all those values going down in a diagonal fashion are the same, or from the upper right-hand corner to the upper or lower left-hand corner. So if there is a win state, we're going to return the value of the winner. Otherwise, I think it just returns -1. Okay, so if there is a winner, if it's greater than 0, then we're going to print who the winner is. We're going to show that in a J option, which I was going to talk about here in a little bit. Yeah, dialog box. And actually print a simple message to a dialog box using this J option pane, show message dialog. It takes a J-frame as a parameter, but you can just pass null. That's one thing that I really don't like about Java. Like if this was Unity or something, I could just use, I know it's bad, but I could use a game object find to find the object that I'm looking for, maybe cache that in a variable. In Java, you actually have to pass that in as a parameter somehow. So if you don't pass in JFrame as a parameter to your board class, you don't have a reference to it. You have no way of getting a reference to it. As far as I'm aware, there may be some new way of doing it, but I'm not aware of how to do that. But you can pass null right here, and that just makes it a default J option pane. It is, I believe, a modal window, so if it won't let you click, well, let me go ahead and run it. Oh, it's still running. Whenever you win the game, it won't let you click on anything else outside of that. Well, outside of that window right there. So you can't go back and click anything else here. So let's see here. And the second parameter to your JOption pane is the message that you want to be displayed in that dialog box. So this JOption pane in Swing is pretty nice. In the old version of Java, in the AWT, there was no JOption pane, so actually you have to like subclass dialog, which is kind of like a dialog box, and it's a little bit more involved than just a one-liner like that, which is, I think, is why they added this, because somebody just wants to show a dialog box and not have to implement another subclass. Okay, so I talked about that. There's also a mouse motion listener, so if you do have a game where you want to track where the mouse, it's kind of like polling, but not really, but it will give you in real time the current position of the mouse. You can implement mouse motion listener, which is different than mouse listener, and that will give you the current position of the mouse in real time. So I talked about that. Other GUI components, a J button if you want to put a button on there. That's what I have with that restart. So if you click a few of these, you can press restart, and that restarts your game. So that's implemented using a J button, which I have that in this, is it tic-tac-toe panel? J button. Okay, so I don't actually do a subclass of J button. I just call this J button and pass it the restart label, which is a constant. So in Java, one difference between C# constants or finals. So I just pass in restart right there. And the reason I do this is because to get an event when a button is clicked, you have to actually implement action listener, and then you implement, which is another interface, which has this abstract method called action perform. So you have to implement action perform, and it takes action event as a parameter, and I just call it E right here. So what this action event has is an action command, which you get by e.getAction command. You can assign that to a string. Then what you do is you compare that command that's returned by e.getAction command with that label of that button, which is the restart label. So that's the reason why I have this constant here. Otherwise, we'd have to put restart. Then if we change that label, then we'll have to change it in all of our code. So if we just define it up here, we can change it up here, then none of the code down here has to be changed. So what this stir command dot equals does, it's basically string comparison. I know in C#, I think you can just use the double equals. In C, you have to use the stir comp and check whether it equals 0. But in Java, you just use dot equals. And so if it equals that button name, then we just call that board restart method that I talked about earlier. Talked about that. Okay, JPanel. So the JPanel is basically a container for multiple GUI components. So that's why I extended JPanel right here. Then I assigned this JPanel back to the JFrame. Okay, so I could put multiple things in there. And then there's also layouts for these containers, like your JPanels. There's a border layout, which is what I used for that content pane. So in a border layout, you have like the center is the game here. And you can also define things as like south, north, east, and west. And if I go back to my other code right here, oh crud. Go back to this code and go to my file open and tic-tac-toe.java. Yeah, so you can see here when I create the get content pane, I create the board and put it at the border layout center, and to put that panel of buttons below it, I use border layout south. So by default, the default layout is the border layout, but you can do things like a grid layout where they're kind of laid out in a grid. Then a box layout is like where you put components from like left to right, from top to bottom. I think there's also a flow layout, so it's kind of like a flow layout. A few differences from C#, since these languages are so similar. And I did this all from memory, so you may want to double check these, or I'll go double check these later. But in Java, you have a Boolean, and it's actually a Boolean. So that's your basic true false data types. In C#, it's a bool. In Java, you use the extends keyword to extend a class. In C, it's just a colon. To refer to a superclass in Java, you use super. In C#, it's base. To import a library, in Java, it's import. In C#, it's using. Get a random number in Java, as I talked about earlier, it's math.random. In C#, I think this is actually Unity specific here. It's random.range. Maybe it's C. Or C#. I can't remember.
Actually, I think these days in Java, there's another class that most people use, java.util.random.
Oh, okay. So that may be a better method to use than math.random. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like in Java there's multiple options there for getting a random number. I know like in GameMaker and like Unity, there's like a random method for getting a random float from 0 to 1. Then there's another random method for getting a random integer value. So yeah, I'll change that and put Java util random in here.
Yeah, that one, actually, it's a class that has multiple methods, so it has like get next float, get next int, get two versions actually. One that's actually you put in a range, get next boolean, and so on.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So definitely use math. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, so, and also for constants, as I mentioned earlier, Java uses final, C# uses const, and a print debug text, as I mentioned earlier, system out print line, C# using Unity is debug.log. I think there's a specific, I forget what it is in C#.
It's console.log. Console.write.
Oh, console.write. Cool. Yeah, I knew it's something like that. I always have to look it up. That's me. Is like, well, I know the basics of all these languages. I just don't commit all of the syntax to memory. I think that's just kind of like, but it is helpful when you're like writing stuff in real time. Okay. Anyway, so packaging your game, and I don't have an example of this, but you can put all of your class files into a jar file, which is a Java archive. And that just makes it a little bit easier to distribute your game rather than like giving people a bunch of class files. One thing you got to do is if you put it in a jar file, you have to have a manifest file. I think it's usually, I forget what it's called, like manifest.mf or something like that. And you got to put it in like a webint folder or something like that, manifest folder. But in that manifest file, you're going to declare the default class, because otherwise it won't know what class has the system out public static void main. So you got to find that in your manifest file. So I won't go into that. I'm just going to say it's there. It makes it a little bit easier, so you can just give people a jar file with your game. Then if the person you give your jar file to already has the JRE installed on their system, then they can just double click that jar file and it will run your game. Okay, so I have some examples of some of my old projects that I wrote years ago. See if I can find, I thought I already had it brought up. So let's go L. Smith, presentations. presentations, Java for game dev, projects. So this is some of the games that I wrote a long time ago. One that I was kind of proud of is went to the wrong directory. Is this Mind Trial game? So I wrote this as one of my upper level computer science courses when I was at Georgia Tech. So you can create 2 players, foo and bar, add player, and then start game. So one thing cool about this is like I used the same old bytecode, the same class files, and it still run, or the same jar file. So what you want to do with this is you want to roll. And one thing that I always wanted to add to this game is like to show where you can move. But it's a little quiz game, and it has a timer, so it counts down. You have 30 seconds to answer the question. So, yeah, basically this is Trivial Pursuit. So imaginary line, I think this one was I think this was Equator. Yeah, okay. So the objective of this game, you keep rolling until you get a question wrong. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Following smaller. So that one was Russia right there. So the objective is to land on these pie slice areas. So like right there was the name given to the study of rocks, so geology. So yeah, if you answer a question correctly when you're on one of these pie slices, then you get a piece of the pie added to your marker right there. So you just keep answering questions. That one, you can tell how old this was. Like the biggest news story right now, and it was Y2K. So you can tell when this was written. But yeah, basically, I think this was implemented in a canvas, and all the source code for all of this is out there. I think I put all this on my GitHub. But yeah, it's been a long time since I looked at this. But yeah, it's basically kind of the same thing with the tic-tac-toe. I have a board, and I think I actually made an array containing all the coordinates for all the slice or all the spaces on the board. So it just checks to see whether you've clicked in one of those cells. So there's quite a bit of code. I think I was a little bit better at documenting code back then. I actually had comments for all the... Yeah, and this is pretty nice if you format your comments like this, your function comments, then you can actually... There used to be a Java program it makes all of your function declarations. It'll generate HTML files with kind of like a little API for you, and it pulls in all these parameters, especially the ones that use these @ signs, so you can actually define things like the return values and the author. I think up at the top, no, I didn't have it for this one, has author and things like that defined. Yeah, so that was the cool little Trivial Pursuit game. There was a few other projects. So, like one of the class assignments we had, if I can go back up here, projects. So is this P7. One of the projects we had was a star viewer. Now, I implemented the viewer for this. They gave us all the data, but it's basically this little star viewer where you could zoom in and view these constellations. You move right. Oops, want to move left. It's got this little navigation buttons right here. It'd be nice if I had scroll bars for this, but you can actually turn off the names and just view that, or you can turn off the lines or turn on the names with only the dots. I think there's an option that I implemented. You can change the color to like red, and you say okay, and it'll change the lines and the names to that color. You can make the stars a lot larger like that, so you can really see where they're at like that. So your options, change it to like cyan, makes it a little bit more readable. That was a star viewer that I did for a class project. This was a fence game that we had to do, and basically this alternates between red and blue. So the objective of this game was to make a fence from one side to the other. So player one is red, so I want to make a red fence from side to side like that. And really, you're supposed to try to block the other player from creating events. So one downside to this, I don't think I ever implemented the end state for this. So you can actually start a new game just by pressing that. So it doesn't actually determine the winner. This was a program. It's kind of like a little keyboard But unfortunately, it looks like, now here's one thing that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't play the sounds, but you're supposed to be able to like enter like notes to play and submit that, like B, C, A, but that doesn't work anymore. I'm gonna have to go in. You can see in the background, it's displaying a stack trace. So if you ever try to reference like an old class or anything like that, you'll see that stack trace in the background. This is another program I kind of just wrote for fun. It's a little solitaire game. See if I can. For some reason, it doesn't want to display the graphics on the first frame, but you can actually like drag. So this does implement the mouse motion listener. So whenever you click, and then it detects where the mouse position is, like in real time. So you can click that, and then move that over. So then it also detects clicks on these cards as well. Then if you do have like an ace, you can move that up there. So it's a simple little solitaire game. I did do an encryption project. So this really isn't a game, but it's kind of cool. So I can say like Knoxville game design for a message. So I wrote this for a cybersecurity class a long time ago. So one of the types of encryption methods is the Caesar cipher. So that basically takes every letter in your message and adds one. So like a K, H-I-J-K-L turns into an L, and an N turns into an O. So you can like encrypt messages pretty easily. Then you can kind of change the shift in that. So you can create different messages based on the shift value there. I think I've only I only ever implemented like 3 or 4 different encryption methods with this. One that was cool is this columnar transposition. So that'll take your message and lay them out in 4 different columns. Then you'll get your ciphertext by reading those down. I actually did do DES encryption, but I'm not going to run that right now because that one takes a long time. And it does give you some debug information here on the side. Oh, and one that I wrote for fun was a triple triad game. So I think I can expand this. So this was from Final Fantasy VIII. And for some reason, the sound doesn't work in this anymore. But it's kind of like a little collectible card battle game where you select your cards. And I did use the card images from Final Fantasy, so you can basically drop down. This did have some simple AI. I mean, it can be, but I think it just puts a card in a random position. I never did finish that. But the objective is to beat all the other cards. So like a 3 on the left side beats a 1 on that side. So the objective is to get a greater value than their opponent. And this did actually have the sound. There's something broken in the new Java with reading and sound. Or they deprecated the old sound methods for some reason. I want to mention this. This was a Trade Wars helper that I wrote a long time ago. Trade Wars was a BBS game that you could play. So you could actually use this to aid you in playing the game and map sectors, map the universe, and things like that. You could actually connect to different BBSs, but I think you got to have it already set up, your account set up and everything. I was trying to log into some of these and get it set up, but I didn't finish that in time. I have a few like small little programs. I'll just show this graphing one that I did real quick. So you could actually create a graph and like call it foo and create different values. So you can add like A is 5, B is 10, and C is like say 4, add, and then okay. And it'd create a little graph for you, and you can add and remove that. Oh, and you could actually change the style of graph to like a bar graph or a line graph, things like that. Okay, I think that's all the stuff I wanted to show. I had a little simple quiz game, but I'm not going to show that off. Okay, well, I think that's it for Java. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Not necessarily. I don't have anything in specific to comment or mention.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Well, I hope everybody found it interesting. And yeah, it's just another option out there for making games. I think it definitely, if you're doing like event-driven games. I think it's definitely a great tool for doing those. Let's see here.
I would say that even though it's kind of good for you, I guess you might say, to use the text editor and the Java C command, that realistically, I would probably get NetBeans or Eclipse or maybe IntelliJ, even though I don't like that. But get an IDE, because then it'll package and make the jars and everything for you.
Yeah, I didn't talk anything about IDEs. Yeah, that's kind of like a whole nother talk. But yeah, definitely. See, I've used IntelliJ quite a bit, but yeah, I think they're all kind of the same. But yeah, I know they have like things where they have like Ant builds and Maven builds and all that, so it'll build everything for you, and you don't have to worry about running all that by command line.
Yeah, I think I've used a very, very tiny amount of Java, and especially coming from .NET, it's good to use an IDE. That is a little more intimidating because you have to configure a lot of that stuff instead of just like it being done for you. So if you're going to get started, I would probably allocate some time to just figuring that out. And I think the examples you gave were really good for that, because you're not plugging in a bunch of complex libraries or anything.
Yeah, I think it's always good to know like the backup method and everything. But yeah, if I'm doing stuff at work or whatever, I usually do use an IDE, especially if you're doing like Android, because like a lot of the Android stuff, if you're not using a game library, it's written in Java, and I think it almost requires you to use I think the new version of Android Studio like requires IntelliJ or NetBeans or one of them. I can't remember which one, but
I just downloaded it, and it's basically a modified version of IntelliJ. Whereas I think in the past it was based on Eclipse, but now it's based on IntelliJ.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing is like IDEs, they do syntax highlighting, they do, IntelliSense, the code completion, all that. And you can also set up different versions of Java. So if you have multiple different JDKs, you can pick which one you want to use, and you can also target different build versions, which you can also do that by command line, but we're using specific older APIs and things like that. But yeah, definitely IDEs are the way to go for more complex projects. I just wanted to show off really quick a game that I did for GM48. It's called Mr. Adventure. So it's a little treasure collecting game. So the objective is there's all these different types of treasure and enemies, such as these little birds and spiders. And at the top, I'll just show a video. I'm not going to actually play it or anything. Let's see if I make this bigger right here. Oh, am I sharing out? Oh, crap.
No.
Okay, let me share.
I was about to say.
I'm getting better to remember when I'm not sharing. Okay, share screen. Share. Oh, share. Okay. So, yeah, this is Mr. Adventure right here. Make them bigger. And so basically you start out. So one thing that I really focus, so it'll say at the top of the screen, like collect blue gems or collect red coins. And you have like 8 seconds to collect it. Then it'll change to a different thing to have to collect. So it's constantly you're having to pick up different things. And you got like the little hourglass icon at the top to let you know how much time you have until you have to collect something new. And I made it where the thing you have to collect is flashing. So it isn't like, oh, you got to figure out, look at the thing at the top. You kind of just see what's flashing and collect that. But one thing I did focus on with this game is making the difficulty curve increase. So, like on the first level, you only have 2 different types of treasure, which are the gem and the coin, and only 2 different colors, which are blue and red. So then in the second level, I added a new treasure, or no, I added a new color, which is green. Then on the final level, I added a new treasure, which is a chalice. So you can see here, let me kind of skip forward here. So on this final level, you got a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of different a lot of different treasures, more enemies. So basically the birds go in a circle. I basically implemented that using sine and cosine. And then the spiders, those are basically like your Octoroks in Legend of Zelda. They move in a random direction for like 2 or 3 seconds and then stop for a second or two, then move in a new random direction. Also, I had to make sure that if one of the enemies did reach the bottom or the top or one of the sides of the screen, then you change the velocity so they don't keep going in an infinite direction. I did add like a health meter so you can get hit 3 times. I wanted to have it where you'd have a whip like Indiana Jones and whip the enemies, but this was a 48-hour game jam. I think I only actually spent like a day working on this. So if I wanted to go back and work on this more, I would maybe add away different items and things like that, or different weapons that you can use. And then all treasure collected. Okay, so I worked on that. Also been still working on, I guess I will play this one, the SDL shooter game. See if I can start that up real quick. So I created 2 new enemies for SDL shooter. One is an enemy, it's kind of like the King Blob in Dragon Quest, if anyone's ever played that, where you attack the enemy so many times, and I should have run this by command line. Let me close that. Let me go back. CD project, CD SDL shooter. Then I want to run. Do I have it? Okay, I want to run SDL shooter with no sound, no music. Let's see if that works. Oh, I didn't want to run Visual Studio. I don't want to run .c file. Let's see if that works. Oh no. Let's see here. Yeah, but basically I added an enemy that breaks out into multiple pieces. Let's see here. CD build. CD SDL shooter windows. And SDL shooter with those same parameters. See if that works. Okay, I think this worked. Okay. So I think he's on this level. Oh, so I did add the spider enemies where these guys jump around. I think, so I still have it where you can switch between multiple weapons, and each weapon uses a different amount of energy to use based on what power. So you got 3 different keys, Z, X, and C. So Z will do a small shot, X will do a little bit more with 2, and C will do 4 at a time. But each weapon has a different effect. Like this is a blast weapon, but I'm just trying to get past these guys right now. Let's see here. But ideally I want to have it where after each stage you get a new weapon. Okay, die suckers. Guys are so annoying. Okay, so this is the new one that I added. So you blast this guy so many times, then he'll split out into 4 other guys, and then when you kill him, he splits out into 8 more guys. So you got to avoid those things. Now, the other enemy that I implemented is these binary guys. So I don't have any graphics for these guys yet, but this is an idea that I had for a game called Blasting Bits, which some people may remember from years ago. But basically it gives you a number in decimal. So the trick is to actually shoot in binary that value. So 2, if you shoot the second one over, that's a 2. So for like a 7, it's 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. So I click 1, 1, 1, and you kill those guys. So these range from 3 to 5 bits. So for like this one, you shoot 0, 0, 1. It's another 7, so it's 0, 1, 1, 1. And 15 is also, was it 1, 1, 1, 1? So for 3, it's 0, 0, 1, 1. 5 is 0, 1, 0, 1. 14 is what? That's 8 and 4? 8 and 2. Oh no, I don't know my binary. It's 8, 4, and 2. Okay. 8 plus 4 plus 1. So basically you just got to input that binary sequence to defeat those guys. I want to go back and add more add graphics for those guys a little bit later. So yeah, this is currently on my itch.io if anybody wants to check this out. Okay, so there's a couple other things that I wanted to mention. Yeah, so these guys, EC MMO Gamers, they're still going strong. I wanted to mention these guys. They do a Hearthstone podcast. They're here in Knoxville. It's Avantes and Zeratio, but they do a week. They've been doing it for a long time now, but a weekly Hearthstone podcast. They start out talking about like the latest Hearthstone news, and then in the second half, which I don't think they actually put in the podcast, they just do it in the video. They actually play a game of Hearthstone, like using the latest cards and things like that. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Nox Dev. They've helped promote our group and things like that. They do have a Discord channel, which you can, or no, they have Slack. They don't have Discord They don't have Discord, but you can click on Slack and oh, I don't want to invite. I just want to go there. I think it's slack.noxdevs.org. Is that it? No, I don't know where their Slack is. But yes, it's a good way to find other developers here in Knoxville. They got like blogs. I think Dylan, I think you're on here, and I think there's Dylan Wolf, so you can actually find our blogs by clicking like a link there, and it'll take you to dylanwolf.com. And I think I'm on here, Levi Smith. If you want to add yourself to this, it's a little bit tricky. You actually have to go to their GitHub and check out like their project. I forget what it was called. And then update it that way. Yeah, here's Mike. If you want to check out Mike's blog, he's still up here and everything. I think they used to have groups. So I think we're on the groups. Hopefully we're still on the groups page. Yeah, Knoxville Game Design. So if you click that, that'll take you directly to our Knoxville Game Design page. I think to put like a cool picture on here and other stuff, you actually have to, like I was saying, download or check out their GitHub project and update it there and alert somebody. But yeah, check out Nox Devs. They have quarterly events. They had one a week or two ago at that guitar place on Kingston Pike. I didn't go to it. They had like lightning talks and things like that. Yeah, so I think that's about it. It's like MMO Gamer. Okay, so that's gonna wrap it up for February 2020. Let's see here. Where's that? Okay. Check out Dylan Wolf. He's dylanwolf.com. Dylan, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about this month?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he's Dylan Wolf on dylanwolf.com on the web and Twitter. Check out Jacob. He's on Game Jolt, and we'll have all the links on the website. Hey, Jeffrey, did you have anything else you wanted to show off or talk about? See, Jeffrey may have left.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't really have games per se.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have another get-together in April. Oh, I also wanted to say, if anybody ever wants to get together, I know it's like 6 months before we see each other now. If anybody wants to get together for whatever reason, just let me know. I mean, we can do a lunch or evening thing or whatever. Just seems like Ludum Dare's always been good because it kind of set the meeting time for us. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for joining us, Jared. We can find all of us here on the Discord.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, do you have anything else you want to talk about or show off or anything?
Well, I don't know. I have my space shooter isn't new and doesn't have as much content as yours, but I guess I could show that because it is in Java.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Figure out how to show.
Yeah,
push the right button. Okay, so it's flickering a little. I don't know if it handles being. And I had my hand on the mouse instead of playing.
Oh, that's okay. Very cool. So this is just like a simple, like a Space
they
Invaders?
just kind of swarm around. Yes, it's like a simple Space Invaders. And it has 3 enemies, and this one should get the second, and around level 9 it'll get the third. You saw the thing that kind of speeds down.
Yeah, so the enemies, they just move in random positions and just shoot randomly?
More or less. I mean, they have they're coded to kind of use a kind of circle around, but they kind of change their angle randomly as they go.
Oh, okay. So they just like pick a random direction and then just go in that direction for a certain period of time.
And that one just comes and has a sinusoidal pattern.
Oh, okay. That's the one thing I've never figured out how to do is like the Bezier curves and like if I want to set something to go on a certain path.
I think what I actually did was I have it going straight and forward, and then I base the X position on the sign of the Y.
Oh, okay. So obviously this is like a real time game. Have you done any frame count or frames per second performance? Does this run like at 30 frames a second or 60 or?
I think on my computer it gets 60. I might have programmed it for 30 now. I have noticed that Java isn't the most efficient at running things if it's swing.
Mm-hmm.
It creates when I actually looked at it, it creates 17 or 18 threads just for this.
Oh, wow.
Where it's really a single thread game, basically, but it's creating 17 or 18 extra threads just to support swing. And then this game that should have been perfectly fine on an early 80s machine will be a little bit laggy on a lower end, sort of middle of the last decade machine.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a modern one, it's perfectly fine. But
yeah, very cool. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to ask now. Yeah, it looks very cool. Let's see here.
I thought it might be good to share because we're talking about Java, and that's one of my 2 Java games. The other one being the Pac-Man clone that you mentioned at the last meeting.
Yeah, we showed that one off last time. Very cool. So do you have to? I remember Dylan asked this question about one of my games. Do you have to handle delta time in your game? Like if you got more time waiting to get to the next frame, do you have to put a sleep in there between frames?
Yeah, there is a sleep if it takes too much time more than it's intended, and there is a delta time. And yeah, that's the one thing. If you want that kind of real time game in Java, unless you're using someone else's engine or library, you are going to have to write your own game loop and your own delta time and things like that.
Yeah, it's almost like you're creating your own game engine from scratch almost. But yeah, I like examples of showing that Java games running in real time just to show that it can be done. And yeah.
Well, I guess in a way it was. Basically, I wrote the Pac-Man game just totally from scratch, and then that's the game I started after that. And that's the one where I realized I'm going to cut and paste 90% of my code from the other one. So I stopped, set it aside, and sort of pulled out an engine out of the Pac-Man game. And then that's based on an engine that's based on the Pac-Man game. See, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I've never done much code reuse in Java. So are you just taking your class files and putting them in another project? Or are you actually making a jar file with that? Or is there some other way that you're building a library to make that reusable?
I have a version of it in a jar. I often end up just cutting them, including the source code, because that way I get one jar out at the end. And
I don't know how well a jar in a jar would work, but I guess if you had 2 jars side by side, and if your game's in one jar and your library's in another jar, can your game code in one jar reference the libraries in another jar? I don't know how well that would work, but I guess that's...
it does. That's how libraries are usually distributed. You don't put the jar inside the jar, but you basically put it somewhere else where it knows to look for those libraries.
You just set your class path to the second jar so it knows about... Oh, okay, gotcha.
Like a directory where you have all your libraries. But to me, that makes sense for something big like a JMonkey engine game. For a small game, I'd rather it all be in one jar. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, I just cut and paste the folder and just include all the files that way, so that when I hit build in the IDE, it just gives me a game with one jar.
Yeah, that sounds like that's the way to do it there. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is like if you are to like define, I think Java has the concept of packages. So if you define a package and you have like this deep complex structure in your package, like I got com Levi D Smith foo bar baz, and your actual files have to be in that same structure. But as Jared was saying earlier, if you're using an IDE, your IDE will handle all that for you. But I have gotten into like class path hell and things like that, just trying to get things in the right folders where they're supposed to be, because that's the way the package is defined, and one of those fun things about Java. Okay, that's going to wrap it up. I'm Levi Smith at levidsmith.com, GA Tech Grad on social media. You can find our website, knoxgamedesign.org. Let's see here, Knoxville Game Design. And also we're Knox Game Design on Twitter. Make sure you go to the website and check out the mailing list if you want to be notified of updates and things like that. So, we appreciate everybody listening and watching, and we'll be back in a month.